Hi everybody, this is Mario Hernandez. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to be talking about getting started with responsive web design. And if you're watching this video, it's because you're very well aware of what's happening with web design nowadays. Responsive web design is probably one of the hottest topics out there in the web design development um, field right now. And it has become uh, so interesting for people to talk about and work with it because it offers so many advantages when designing websites for various devices. My name is again Mario Hernandez. I'm a web designer and front-end developer. I work with Drupal as my back-end platform. Drupal is a great content management system. So if you are ever in need for a great content management system, highly recommend to look into Drupal. I do most of the work that I do with Drupal is front end, so I code themes and layouts, flexible and responsive layouts. You can find me under designsdrive.com. You can email me. You can also follow me on Twitter, which I highly recommend. I'm at designsdrive, and the reason I ask for you to follow me on Twitter is because I'm constantly posting resources, tips, tricks, training material, all the things you can think about, Drupal design, web design, responsive web design. So you'll find that you'll get a lot of good stuff just by following me on Twitter. So go out there and do that. Today's quick agenda is going to be about responsive web design, obviously, but we're going to be talking about what it is, what's responsive web design, what are the elements of responsive web design, what is it that it takes to design a website to be responsive. We're going to be talking quickly about mobile first and what that is and how you should be using that as the model when designing a responsive website. I'm going to give you a huge list of resources that you will be able to tap into, great resources for you to go and learn some more about responsive web design. And then I'm going to do a hands-on demo on how to design a simple responsive website so you can see what it takes to do something like that. So what is responsive web design? Responsive web design is definitely not mobile design. So people think that responsive web design is mobile design, but it's not. Responsive web design is basically the ability to design a website that adapts to any device size, whether small or large. And we're talking anything from feature phones to smartphones, all the way to large TVs and bigger than that. So uh, responsive web design allows for you to target all those devices with a single source code. And that's the beauty of responsive web design, is that you don't need to create multiple versions of your website, one for mobile, one for desktop, one for large screens. You can do it all with one single website. The article that you see at the bottom there is basically the first article that was written about responsive web design, and this was written by Ethan Marcotte, who also wrote this book here. And I would highly recommend you go out there and grab this book, Responsive Web Design, because it's the one that taught me a lot. This book is the one that introduced me to responsive web design, and I read this book several times and I've learned so much from it. So highly recommend that you go and grab this book because it takes you step by step on how to design a responsive website. The elements of responsive web design are many, but Ethan Marcotte in his book outlines 3 key elements of responsive web design, which are fluid grid. And if you've never used a grid system before for designing the layout of structure of your website, I think you should. Grid systems allow for um, an easy way to put together a layout that is cross-browser compatible, that creates order on your layout. So grid systems are great for that. But for responsive web design, it's not just any grid system. It has to be a fluid grid system. And we'll go into more detail about how you can make use of that. The next element of responsive web design is resizable images or media. Most websites out there obviously have images, and how do you go about making those images resizable or flexible? And I'll be covering very quickly what it takes to make your images resizable, and maybe talk about how you can or may look into more advanced solutions for making images resizable if you have an image heavy website that you're working with. And finally, media queries. And without media queries, responsive web design would not be possible, because media queries is what allows you to detect the size of the browser or the device that a visitor may be using on your website. But really, it's not just that. There's a lot more stuff that you will need to deal with when you work with a responsive website. And there's things like font size, typography, of course, navigation, and many other things that you need to kind of think about, because all those things need to also be responsive, not just the media query, images, and the grid system. It's a combination of a lot of other things, so just keep that in mind. So the grid systems is basically a series of rows and columns, and the premise behind the grid systems is that you can use columns within the grid system to structure the layout of your website. For example, I can say in this example here we have a 12-column grid system, and I can say I want my header to be 12 columns wide. I want my main content section to be 8 columns wide, and my sidebar to be 3 columns wide or 4 columns wide. And the beauty about using a fluid grid system is that you use percentages versus pixels to measure the dimensions of your grid system or regions on your website. And so those are relative measures, when you use percentages. And so you're not longer thinking in pixels when you're using a grid system, because you can just say, I want my sidebar to be 3 or 4 columns wide. It doesn't matter how many pixels that is. And I want my main content section to be 8 columns wide. Again, it doesn't matter how many pixels that is. So grid systems really simplify the way you structure your layout, and we'll go into more detail about how you do that in the demo that I'll be doing a little bit. Resizable images are basically a way for you to be able to resize your images based on the device that you're using or the browser size that you are looking at your website in. And the example that you see here is, I think you can think of the two boxes here. This is pretty much the same image. Just imagine that this is the same image, but the container of the image is different sizes. So therefore, by using the code that you see here, the image is automatically being resized based on how big or large or small its container is. And so the key here is that with this line of code of max width 100%, your image will never exceed its container. And this also applies for other types of media, embed, object, video, and iframes. Like videos from YouTube, you will apply the same type of code to make this happen here. So your videos will never exceed the size of its container. Obviously, as I said before, if you're dealing with a heavy, image-heavy website, you may need to take a look at other more advanced ways of managing images, because the example that I'm giving here simply resizes your image and it makes it look great. However, if you're dealing, let's say, with a 1200 pixel image and you use this code, the image will still be resized, visually still be resized to fit your containers. However, you still be loading a 1200 pixel image, and that could be a problem if you're using a smartphone where connections are not that reliable. So there are other advanced systems out there for managing images in a way that is providing you with smaller file size images for small devices. And you may want to take a look at some of those libraries out there. You can just Google JavaScript libraries for handling images in responsive web design or something to that effect. There is a system out there that is called Adaptive Image System, and I think the idea or the way that works is that if you provide your website with predefined image sizes, your system will automatically know when to serve each different image size based on the device that you're using. So I would highly recommend you look into that. I've used it myself and it works really well. And there's many ones out there. There's also responsive.io. So if you go in your browser to responsive.io, there's a system that I think it just came out, that talks about how you can serve the right size image based on the device size that you're using. So again, there's many options out there. Images, resizable images is basically one of those areas in responsive web design that has not been fully addressed, has not a bulletproof solution has still not been found, but there's many options out there that still do a good job working with images. Media queries is again what makes it all happen. I think without you can probably do a responsive website without resizable images and a grid system to an extent, but you can do it without media queries, because media queries is basically what detects the size of the device when they come to your website, and based on that size is how you can present them with the right layout or design of your website. So media queries are critical, and they're nothing new. They were introduced back in 2001, and you've used them before. I'm sure if you've been designing or developing websites for a while, you've used it when you design when you create a style sheet that is for printing purposes, so people can print your website. That's basically a media query. You're basically saying, let me know when the device is a printer or the media is printer, so I can serve the specific style sheet and present the website in a printable format. So that's a media query. You're basically detecting what type of media device you're using. And so now we're taking advantage of media queries to detect device sizes and be able to accordingly serve the right type of layout or design of your website. So it could be pretty overwhelming when you think about designing a website that will probably be looked at on thousands and thousands of different devices. It used to be that you would design for just one single device, a desktop, a 17, 19-inch desktop. But now it's different. Now you're dealing with literally thousands of devices, and there's hundreds and hundreds of devices that come out every day. So how do you design a product that will work and look well on all devices? It could definitely be overwhelming when you think about it that way. But I think it helps think about those devices on different families of devices. And the three top families of devices that all of the mobile devices out there, desktop devices out there fall into are basically desktop, and that includes, perhaps laptops, notebooks, and then we move on to the tablet family, and whether it's portrait, landscape, mini or large tablets, they're still considered tablet, and then finally smartphones. So when you think about it, those devices in these three types of families, then it makes things a little bit easier for you, because you don't have to necessarily know what specific size each device is or what operating system they're using. Just think about it, that they fall in one of these families here. So that makes it easier for you to design your devices. Common breakpoint is what you use to be able to target specific devices, and based on the families that we just talked about. And there are some common breakpoints, but this is kind of a controversial subject, because many people argue, and I can agree with them, that there should not be a specific breakpoints for your design, for designs out there. The breakpoints should be determined by the specific project that you're working on, because each project is different. So, a breakpoint that works for one project may not work for the next project based on what that project is about. And the idea is to be able to decide, what smartphones, what is the breakpoint, the common breakpoints that smartphones fall under. And in this example here, we're looking at the smartphones 480 pixels wide. It's kind of the width of an iPhone on landscape mode, but that would be the iPhone 4, and now we have iPhone 5 and iPhone 5s, so that may change a little bit. The breakpoint for an iPhone or a smartphone on portrait mode is about 320 pixels. And for tablets, we have the breakpoint, or the range of the size range between 480 and 768 pixels is what will pretty much cover a tablet, small tablets that is. And then we go into large tablets or tablets in landscape mode. We're looking at anywhere from 768 pixels to 940 pixels. And so if you design something within that size, then you will be covering those devices. So again, breakpoints are simply a way for you to say, okay, what happens when a device is this size? What do I do with my design or my layout? And again, we'll be covering that in just a little bit on how to address each type of device or family device based on how big or how small your screen or your device is. So these are breakpoints kind of to use as guides, but not necessarily as strict rules on the sizes of each device. But this is definitely helpful to start with as far as addressing the different device sizes when you're putting your layout or design together. The viewport meta tag is very critical because I'm sure you've seen if you look at a website on your mobile device, the website looks super tiny because they're fitting the entire website in the small screen, and that's because the website is using the full device resolution. You know, and new devices nowadays, they have really high resolution on their screens, so that's why things look so tiny. But the viewport tag, what it does is it says, you know what, ignore the resolution of the device, and in fact show me the physical device size. I don't care what the resolution is. So when you're looking at, as an example of an iPhone, the resolutions will be anywhere from 320 pixels to 480 pixels, or maybe a little bit bigger if it's the iPhone 5. But that's the physical resolution of the device. The physical screen that's the physical screen size of the device, not necessarily the resolution. So that's what the viewport meta tag does. And based on those resolutions, then you can start tweaking your design and layout, just like we talked about with the breakpoints before, that you're addressing your devices based on the size of the screen. And the viewport tag is what allows you to basically get rid of the resolution and focus on the physical dimension of the screen of the device. Fonts, I include font on this talk because it's very critical. You know, fonts are essential. They need to be resizable. They need to be relative fonts in order for people to zoom in into your design. So there is many ways you can address fonts. Obviously, one of the most popular ways is to use pixels. But the problem with pixels is that pixels are not relative font size. They're fixed font size and they're not resizable. So that may not necessarily work on all cases. But then there's EMs, and EMs is basically EMs are a relative font size that is widely used, widely supported by browsers, and their base font size is based on the capital M. So the default font size of a website, before you apply any type of styles, the browser base font size will be about 16 pixels. So 1M, the default body size will be 16 pixel. So think about if you're putting together a web page and don't add any CSS at all, you're looking at about 16 pixels for your default font size. So 1M will be equal to 16 pixels. So that's pretty much 100% of the default body font size. And obviously 2Ms is equal to 32 pixel. So that's kind of the way you can think about Ms, because they can be pretty confusing to use if you don't know what the equivalency between Ms and pixel is. And Ms can be used for anything. In fact, you will see them more and more with new designs. You will see them more and more that people are using Ms more and more because they're relative font size, and not just for font size, but for anything, for padding, margin, height, and things like that. So they're definitely very widely supported, and they come in very handy when you are working on a responsive web design. But there's problems with Ms. And the problems with Ms is that they're compounding, the cascading or compounding problem. Ms are relative font size of their parent, which means that they inherit the font size of the parent. So if I have a list, and the list item is 1.5 Ms, that is about 24 pixels based on our default font size of 16. So 1.5 will be about 24 pixels. But if we have another list inside that list, then the second list will not be 24 pixels, it will be 32 pixels, because it's inheriting the font size of its parent in addition to applying its own size. So that could be a problem for us, and I'm going to give you a quick demo right now so you can see for yourself how Ms could be problematic for us. I'm going to go to CodePen, And you know, if you never use CodePen, I highly recommend it. Um, it's a nice in-browser editor that you can use for you know, trying code before you actually commit it to your project. So I'm going to quickly put together a div here. I'm going to give it a class of, let's say, fonts, and I'm going to create the word responsive. Okay, and I'm going to close this div, and then I'm going to create another div inside of it, like a child div basically. I'll also give it a class of fonts, and I'm going to call it web design. I'm going to close this child div here. So as you can see on the left side of the screen, we have responsive web design, and by default, again, as I said before, any styles, we have about 16 pixels in size here for our typography here, our copy. So if I go here and I say fonts, and I'll say font size, let's see, 24 pixel. You can see that this became a little bit bigger. If I go 34 pixel, they became a little bit bigger. And it's fine because they're both the same size, no problem there. Again, but the problem with pixels is that they're not resizable, they're not relative. So let's try this by using ems. And I'm going to try, let's see, 2em. 2em is the default size. And just by looking at that, where it says 2em, you can see how the word responsive is much smaller than the words web design. And the reason for that is because the words web design are inheriting the size of their parent, which is responsive, and then adding their own size to that. So that makes them double the size. So this could be a problem as you start working on your project, and as you narrow down the page, and you may find you know, nested items like lists and lists within lists. This could be a problem for you. So it's very tricky to address if you don't know exactly how to do that. But the fix for this is to use what is called RAM, and RAM stands for the root of the document, basically root ems. And the difference between RAMs and ems is that RAMs get their sizes from the root of the document, and it's consistent throughout the entire document. So once you specify the size of your font in RAMs at the root of the document, at the HTML level, then that size will be consistent throughout the entire document. You don't have to worry about nesting items, because those nested items will remain at the same size that you specify up on top. So let me just show you real quick. If I just add the word RAM to my font size, now you can see that the size of the fonts now are the same. And the nice thing about RAMs is that not only they're relative and they're resizable, but obviously they get rid of that nesting issue that we just demo there. So RAMs are definitely the font unit measure to use, because of they work well in responsive web design. And if you go to caniuse.com, this is the website that I have, caniuse.com, and just type RAM in the search box here, it tells you what the browser support for RAM is. And you can see that everything that is green is basically supported. So anything from IE9 and above is supported as far as Internet Explorer. And then Firefox, Chrome, Safari, all those support RAM, so they're widely supported, and so they're safe to use, except with IE8 and below. But there are ways to specify a fallback unit of measure to address IE8 and below, and we'll talk about it in just a little bit. But the bottom line is, if you're specifying your font size in RAMs, then what you should do is specify the same font size, the equivalent of that size in pixels, just before your RAM. And I'll show you how that's done a little bit, but that's how you can address the issue of Internet Explorer 8 and below not supporting RAMs. But they're widely used, they're safe to use, and highly recommend that you use RAMs for your font size. So let me go back here. I think I have a couple more slides to go over. So yeah, so RAMs are basically just like ems, but they're based on the root of HTML. So the size that you specify up on top of the HTML level will be consistent throughout the entire document. They're supported by all browsers. Here's what I was talking about, being able to specify a fallback for IE8 and below. So if I have a heading 1, for example, and I say I want it to be about 16 pixels or 1M, what I would need to do for IE8 and below is specify font size equals 16 pixels, right? And then right immediately after that, say font size again, and this time do in RAM. So what's going to happen here, Internet Explorer will see this declaration and say, okay, font size 16 pixels. Okay, I understand that. And then they'll say font size 1 RAM. Says, I don't understand that, so I'll use 16 pixel. But the browsers that support RAMs will say, okay, font size 16 pixel, that's good. I understand that. And then they'll say font size 1 RAM. Oh, I understand that too. So I'll use the last declaration. So that's what you will. That's how the browsers can. That's how you can decide which unit for the browsers to use based on the order that you put this. So if you were to put this in the reverse order, then all the browsers will be using pixels, because they will always use the last declaration, and all browsers support pixels, of course. So here's the caniuse.com. I would highly recommend to go to the website. It's a great website, not just for RAMs, but to look at many other CSS3 properties that you may be thinking about using on your design, and that website gives you an idea which browser support that property that you're planning on using. Mobile first is a coin phrase that was introduced by Luke Broblowski, and the principle here is saying that every time you start a new design, if you're planning on doing responsive web design, that you should start with the smallest device first. The reason for that is because when you start with the smallest device, you're actually forced to prioritize, because you no longer have all the space that you had before on a web browser, on a full screen web browser. So what do you do when you have 80% less of your canvas? Obviously, you're forced to prioritize, because what you want to do is you want to present the most important content first to your visitors. So starting with the smallest device forces you to do that, and it makes you think about things that you wouldn't think otherwise, as far as optimization for not just content, but performance. You don't want to overload your screen with lots of content that is not necessary. You want to put the most important content, and that kind of helps with performance, because you're just putting what is required of your website, and that may always, for the most part, may just be plain content, not images, not videos, none of that. So mobile first is the recommended way to start a web design project, because it just makes things easier. As you scale up onto larger devices, then you can start getting a little more creative as far as the layout or the content that you want to display, or the way you want to display the content on those large devices. But starting mobile first is definitely the way to go when it comes to responsive web design. And here's the book that I also recommend you read, because this is the one that talks about what mobile first is all about, how you should address it, and why you should address it. So, and here is the book by Luke Broblowski, who I've seen speak before, and he's a great speaker, and has a lot of knowledge about mobile first. So here's my contact information, and the reason I put this here is because I usually forget to come back to this slide after I go into my demo. So here's you can go to designsdrive.com. You can email me at designs@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter at designsdrive. You can also download these slides at slideshare.net/Mareki. So please follow me, because you'll be getting a lot of good stuff by following me. And so let me jump. Here's some resources also. So again, if you go and download the slides that by going into that URL down there at the bottom, you'll be able to get all these resources. Tons and tons of resources. These are great resources that have helped me a lot to move forward with responsive web design. So make sure you go grab the slides for this. And I'm gonna go into a hands-on now, and I haven't rehearsed this at all, so I may be going back and forth, but please bear with me real quick. So the first thing I want to do is I want to I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go and download 960 fluid grid system. We talked about using a grid system when you're working with a responsive website, because that's one of the elements that you should use when designing a responsive website. there's many frameworks out there that you can use, front-end frameworks for designing websites. And the frameworks, oftentimes, they provide a grid that is fluid, that is responsive, but they also provide a whole bunch of other tools that you can take advantage of, like buttons, forms, predefined styles for typography, forms, buttons, tables, drop-downs, navigations, and everything else. And I'll be talking about quickly, if I have time, to go over a couple of frameworks that I highly recommend. But for this example, I'm going to be just needing just a grid, just a simple grid, but it has to be a fluid grid. And the 960, if you have never heard of the 960 grid system, if you go to 960.js, this is the project page for the 960 grid system. It's a great grid system to use. Many large companies use it. If I show grid here, it shows you, this is a 12-column grid system. Here's a 16-column grid system. And this is just a nice way, again, to structure your content, to give order to your content. But it has to be a fluid grid system. And this one here is a fixed width, so this won't work for us. But there's a fluid version of this. In fact, if you scroll to the bottom, all the way to the bottom here, there's where it says fluid here. And when you click there, this is where you can go and grab the fluid version of the grid, the 960 grid system, who, by the way, was not created by the same person who created the original 960 grid system, but still works the same way, except that it's fluid. I tried going to download it here, but for whatever reason, it was broken, the link. So that's why I'm looking for this here. And here's the fluid version. So I'm just going to go and click download the zip file here and save it on my downloads documents. And then I'm going to go preview it and extract the content of that zip file and go into there. And this comes with a lot of stuff, and you really don't have to worry about most of this here. If you want to take a look at it, that's fine. But the only thing we need for our project is this file here, the grid.css. It's just a CSS file that has all the rules already for our grid system. So, but before I grab that file, I need to create a project folder for myself. I'm going to go to my desktop here. I'm going to create a new folder. Just going to call it responsive web design. And inside this folder, that's going to be the root of my project. And here I'm going to create a folder for CSS. And this is where I'm going to drop that CSS file from the grid system here. So I'm going to just drag it there. So there's my CSS file. And what I like to do is go back a couple steps here, and I'm going to drop my root folder into my editor. I use Sublime Text. If you are shopping around for a text editor, Sublime Text is probably one of the best editors out there. You'll see in a minute some of the things you can do with it. So here's the root of my folder here, and there's my CSS folder, and there's my grid file. So quickly, as you can see, this is using percentages for the dimensions, and everything is based on percentages. So that's why it's fluid and relative. Each of your dimension or regions that you create use percentage. So for example, if I use grid_12, what that means is that I'm using 2 columns out of the 12 columns of the grid, and that will correlate to about 14, almost 15% in width of the entire width of my website. So 15% of that. It will make a little more sense once we go into the code. But quickly, this, what you see here, grid underscore and then the number, that is the classes, the CSS classes that the grid system, this particular grid system, uses for determining the width of any given container or region of your website. So if I create a div with the class of grid_5, that means I'm using 5 columns out of the 12, and that will equivalent to about 40% of the width of the browser. So if I resize my browser, that will still remain 40%, but obviously it will be a little bit smaller because it's being relative size. So just keep in mind that these classes here vary from framework to framework. Other frameworks use different classes names, but the grid system, the 960 grid system, uses the grid underscore and then the number of columns for that you want to use. And we're going to be using the 12-column grid system. You can use 16 columns also, as we saw before, but we're going to be using 12 columns. So every time I specify grid and the number of columns, I'm saying grid 7, for example. Here I'm saying I want to use 7 columns out of the 12 of my grid system. And you probably never have to come to this file to edit at all, because you don't want to edit the original file in the event that in the future you want to upgrade to a newer version of the grid system. You don't overwrite your changes. What you're going to do is you're going to make all your overrides or your modifications in your own CSS file. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a quick CSS file, a custom one, that I'll be using to do all my custom styles. So that's there. I'm also going to be creating a new file here. This will be my index file, just to for my page, for my entire page. And I'm going to HTML5. This is just so it's getting started with responsive web design. And here I'm going to specify the location of my grid CSS file, so I can take advantage of the grid system. I'm also going to add a reference to my own custom CSS file. And as you notice here, I'm putting my custom CSS file last, because cascading style sheets, obviously they are rendered in the order that they are stated here in the head of your document. So if I need to make any changes to the grid system classes on my custom file, then my rules will override the grids, and that's what I want. The other thing that I need to do is add the viewport tag. Let me quickly go here and start with this. Before I start though, I want to show you what we're going to be building real quick here, and I've put together a quick wireframe of mock-up of what we're going to be building. So let me expand this. So what we have here is we have a header, and we have a logo with the title of the website. Then we have our navigation, and after the navigation we have the main content section, which is split in two, into main content and sidebar, and at the end we just have a simple footer. So that's kind of what we're going to be building. So let's jump into the code real quick. So the first thing is I want to start by creating a container on my website, and I actually don't have this here, but just imagine that this website that you see here is basically inside a main container. And so we're going to start with that first, and to make use of the grid system, I need to use the classes of container_12. The number 12 here is telling the grid system that I want to use the 12 column version of the grid system. If I did 16, that means I'll be using the 16 column version of the grid system. So instead of working with 12 columns, I'll have 16 columns to work with. But 12 columns is probably the most popular version of the grid system, so we'll be using that. So that's a div there. I'm going to quickly add a little comment so we don't get lost in our code. And of main container and of container. So that's by simply creating that div with that class of container_12, I'm basically activating the grid system. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, if we look at our website here, I'm going to create the header. And as I said before, grids are basically a collection of columns and rows. So I'm going to create a row of grid_12, and I'm going to also give this a class of header, because I may use this class later on for other things. I always like to use my own classes, CSS classes, to custom style things. I don't want to use the grids classes, so I'm going to use end of header here. And so this is my header, and inside the header we have a logo and the website name, right? So that means we can visually split this in two. The logo will be one region and the website name will be the other region. So we're splitting the row in two sections. And so to do that, I'm going to do grid underscore, let's say 3 for the logo, 3 columns out of the 12 for the logo. And I can say a class of logo here. And then I'm going to create another div, say grid underscore 9, and this will be for the title of my website. So let me start with the logo. I'm going to um, add an image there for the logo, and the source will be, this is a nice website to use to put placeholder the images, um, that way you don't have to go and download images to, to put together a quick mock-up of our website. This is a nice website that allows you to um, um, just use placeholders, and you see in a minute how this works. So let me see here. I'm going to then create the website, and this will be an H1, and I'm going to say, what was it, getting started with responsive web design. So that's in H1. So if I go and preview this on the browser, what you see here is row here with two sections. One is the logo, and the other one is the title of the website. If I inspect the code with the code inspector that comes built in with Chrome, or if you're using Firefox, you can download Firebug, and that allows you to inspect the code and kind of see what's happening behind the scenes on your code. What you see here is that I have the container here for the website, and then I have a row with grid underscore 12, and within this row I have two sections, the grid 3 and the grid 9, and the grid system did this for me. It put them side by side based on the grid classes that I assign. It knows exactly what the width for each of those containers will be. For example, the logo grid, the logo section is about 23% of the full width of my website, and the title of the website is about 73%. So, and there is no margin in between, so that's all together. With that, it adds up to about 100% of the width of my browser. However, what you see here is that the image of the logo is larger than the container where it's in. So you can see that's the container, and you can see that the image sticks out. And here's the image, much larger, because I specify a dimension of 300 pixels. So we need to make sure that that image doesn't go outside our container, and the way we can do that is by going into our custom CSS file. And I'm going to start quickly here by applying the rule that we talked about before. So by applying this rule, what I'm saying here is I want all my images to be 100% wide, which means they're not going to exceed the size of their container. And so if I apply this rule and I go to my browser and refresh, you'll see that now the logo image is smaller now, because it went is now within the container that it holds it, and it won't go beyond that because of the rule that we just applied. So looking again at the way the grid is for me, I didn't have to tell the grid how much margin or padding I wanted between each section, or to put them side by side. I didn't have to tell them to float it. The grid did it all for me automatically by simply applying these classes here, grid 9 and grid 3. So that's an advantage of the grid system, that you don't have to do all that math yourself by hand. It's all already being taken care of for you by the grid system. So that's how the grid system makes things easier for you, because again, all you're doing is simply creating divs and specifying the right classes, and the grid system handles everything else for you. So that's our header there. We'll move on to our navigation, and I'm going to create another row, and I'm going to give it also a class of navigation, and again I'm going to here, end of navigation, just to keep things nice and clean and organized so we know where we are. And then I'm going to create, this is a nice thing about Sublime Text. As you can see, the way I create grids and divs and things, it's very easy to by simply applying classes and pressing the tab key. So I'm going to create an order list to create my navigation, because if you look here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 links as part of our navigation. And I'm going to create an order list with 5 items, right? And inside each item will be an anchor tag with an attribute of href I don't want this to be linked to anything, so this will be that. And I want I'm gonna go link item and then the $sign. And what this does, it allows me to quickly create an unordered list. I leave this for now. I don't have to necessarily use the right link names. I'm just gonna leave this the way it is now. And if I go and refresh my browser, of course, there's my navigation here. And the other thing to notice here, because of the grid system, I don't have to worry about, you know, floating or not floating elements here. But what I mean by that is the grid system knows exactly where to put each row based on the classes that I'm assigning. Here's a row of grid underscore 12, and here's another row, so they don't collapse with each other. It knows exactly where things go. And before I get into the navigation, I'm going to continue with the rest of the structure of the website. I'm going to move this down a little bit, and I'm going to start again with grid. I'm going to create the main content area now, another row. The entire content area will be inside a row, and that will be content, right? So, and here I'm going to add, of course, my comment, add content. And inside the content, as you can see here, we have a main content section and the sidebar. And so the area that I just created is this dark area here, the container of the content, basically. And inside there, I'm going to create two divs. One will be grid underscore 8, and it'll be main. Okay, that's for the main content, and the other one will be grid underscore 4, and that will be sidebar. That will be my sidebar. The key to remember with the grid system is that whenever you're working in a row, whatever regions you create in that row, they all need to add up to 12 columns. As an example, here we have the sidebar is 4 columns, and the main content section is 8 columns, so together they add up to 12. So what I'm going to do here also is I'm going to, since I'm here, I'm going to create the footer, and I'm just gonna give just a quick copyright just a quick copyright message here. I'm gonna go and refresh the browser here, and so what we have here is I'm going to spec the code again, and just to show you what's happening here. So we have our row for the navigation, which I'm going to style in a little bit. Then we have our row here for our main content section, and the main content section has got two areas. Let me move this a little bit here so you can see. Actually, let me move to the bottom here. We have the row itself, and then we have the left side, which is the main navigation, the main content area, and then under here we have the sidebar. And then after that we have our footer down here. So let me start adding some content to this so we can start seeing a real website. And the first thing I'll do is I'm going to add some dummy content to actually the editor allows me to quickly create content, fake content, or dummy content. So I'm going to add my comment here. Let's say end of main, and here I'm going to say end of sidebar, and I'm going to move this down a little bit, just give it a little more room. So here is where I'm going to add some content. I'm going to start with an H1, and it's going to be main article heading. Okay, so that's going to be an H1. I'm also going to create an image since I'm here. Again, using our nice placeholder image website. I'm going to actually see 1200 just to demo something here for you. 400, and after the image I'm going to add some paragraphs. So I'm going to do paragraphs times 4 lipsum. There we go. So that's 4 paragraphs. And then for the sidebar, I'm going to do something similar, except I'm going to do an H2 sidebar blocks headings. That's that. I'm going to add a couple paragraphs here. So paragraphs times 2 lipsum again. So that's 2 paragraphs. And at the end of this one, I'm going to add an image in this case. Source HTTP placehold. This one is going to be about 400 pixels times 200. So that's that. I'm going to the page refresh. So now I have some content. I need to start doing some style for navigation mainly, just so we can see things a little bit the way they're supposed to look. The other thing that I want to do first is I'm going to talk about, we talked about font sizes. I'm going to go font size for the text, and we talked about this before using RAMs. And as I said before, the default base font size for a browser, for a website without any styles, is about 16 pixel. So I want to reduce that to about 10 pixel to be 10 pixel to be the base font size, and that will be about 62.5%. Once I have that established, I've now reduced the base font size to a round number of 10 pixel. And so now I can do body, and I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to do font size. Let me actually move down here. Say font size. I can say 14 pixel for browsers like Internet Explorer. They'll read 14 pixels, but I'm going to do font size again. I'll say 1.4 REM. We talked about this before, how you can use RAMs as a font size, but for browsers like IE, we use pixels, and you put that first before the RAM. So 14 pixels or 1.4 RAM is the same pretty much, because I've now reduced the base font size to 10 pixel. So using numbers like this are now equivalent to, for example, if I wanted to use 18 pixels, then the equivalent of that in RAMs will be 1.8 RAM. So just something. And again, in my resources that I'll be providing later, you'll find a more robust explanation how these RAM things work. Family, font family, I'm going to do Helvetica, Arial, and this is just to use a fancy font for everything. So there we go. I'm going to maybe line height 1.6, just to give a little more room in between the lines of the margin, so it's better, more readable. There we go, that's better. The other thing, I'm going to move on to the navigation. I may come back here later on, but let me move on to navigation. So our navigation is wrapped into a navigation container. So I always do that. Navigation, and I'm going to give that container a background of dark gray, and let's see here, and what else. That's as far as the navigation. Maybe height of 40 pixel perhaps, and then after that I'm gonna go to navigation, UL, margin 0, padding 0, list style none. I don't want the bullet points under my navigation. For example, I have bullet points here. I don't want those, and I want, so that's 40 pixel, and the navigation is sticking out because right now the navigation is aligned vertically, so I need to change that. I'm going to then move on to navigation LI, because there's I would say flow, let's see, float left, I believe may do it for me at this one here. No, I need more. display inline. Display inline, and I think I just need to do a little margin right, let's say 14 pixel, or I can use maybe 2M. Again, I said before that you can use M's for font size and also for other things. So there we are. Maybe add a little margin, or I can do that on the anchors instead of that. So I can say navigation, color white, margin, or actually I can do padding. I can do 10 pixel padding all around each navigation, each list item or each anchor. There we go. And text decoration none. I don't want underline under the list. Display block. So there we go. So that's our navigation, our main article, our sidebar, and finally our footer. Our footer, I'm going to give a little margin to our footer. Margin top, say 25 pixel. Let's do 2.5 M. There it is. And background. I'm going to do the same thing as I did for the navigation, same background color. And up here in the margin, I probably margin top 0, margin bottom 3 M's, just so my footer is now all the way at the bottom. That didn't take for whatever reason. Let me see. Maybe I should use padding. So my footer is different. I'll leave it that way. I'm gonna give a little height to the there. There's my and I guess I should have put the footer and this here into a paragraph, so I can do something with the paragraph on my style. This is just regular, nothing special about this here, by the way. This is just padding, 10 pixel padding around the paragraph of the footer, so it's not just there. Okay, that's okay. We're gonna leave it that way for now. So that's the basic structure of a website here, just for at least for now for desktop. But you can see just being fluid. So already things are kind of float nicely, but it's not necessarily responsive at the moment. It's just simply things are just resizing because we're using percentages instead of pixels for dimensions here. But what I like to do is I like to now start addressing the responsive part of our website. So I'm going to start, we talked about using mobile first, and I'm going to start by first creating on my custom CSS file. I'm going to start by creating some breakpoints to address the different devices. And before I start putting rules, I'm going to make sure that they work first. So I'm going to start by simply applying media, right? This is how you specify your media queries. I'm going to say minimum width of 320 pixels. So we're looking at devices that are about the iPhone size and in portrait mode, and max width of 480. And so again, any device that is between 320 pixels and 480 pixels has a screen of between 320 pixels and 480 pixels will inherit these rules here. And just for testing purposes, I'm going to say the background of the body will turn it into red, just to see if this rule is actually working for us. So I'm gonna go beyond 480 pixels, which means that this rule that I just applied is not gonna work because I'm not within that range. But if I reduce my fonts, my browser here, when I reach the 480 pixel range, the background color should turn, oh, this is a mistake here. I don't need the semicolon there. That's why it's not working. I always make the mistake. So I'm going to refresh my browser again. When I reach the range between 320 and 480 pixels, my background should turn red, and there it is. So I know this rule is working properly. I'm going to create one more rule, and this one is going to be anywhere between 481 pixels and 768 pixel. This rule will cover large smartphones like Androids. You know how Androids have large screens, some Android phones, and also small tablets. And I'm going to turn the background for this one yellow. And if I go here, I'm going to go beyond the 768 just to make sure that the changes do take effect when I resize my browser. I'm going to resize. So when I reach the range between 481 pixels and 768, my background should turn yellow, and there it is. And as I keep going down, then it goes red because I'm not reaching the smartphone size. And the last one that I don't really think I need, but just to show, I'm gonna say 769 pixel and a maximum of 1200. This will be for devices like large tablets and also even desktop or laptop monitors. This rule will cover those. I'm going to turn this into orange. I'll hit the cap. And so if I go here and refresh, so that's red, yellow, and then when I get to that orange, and it goes all the way here and then it turns white because now I've exceeded the 1200 pixel mark. So I can create another one, which I won't use for this website that we're building here, but just to show you that I'm gonna say for this one I just need one of these declarations here because I don't care what the max is as long as the minimum, actually I really deleted the wrong one. Anything beyond, if the minimum width, this one here, if the minimum width is 1200 pixels, so anything beyond 1200 will turn the background blue. So I really don't care what the max is. It could be for a large TV, it could be for, but anything beyond that I can do things with it. So there it goes. If I go beyond into even bigger than this, the background will remain blue because I don't have a specific range. I just have an initial point to begin with. So, but the other ones I do have a range because I want to be more specific in which device families I want to address. So this is what I talked about before, being able to categorize your breakpoints into different device families. So we started with mobile devices. From there we moved on into small tablets or tablets in portrait mode, and then large tablets or landscape tablets or desktop, laptop devices, and finally into very large screen sizes. So those are rules. I won't be using all of them, but I just want to show you how those will work for you. So the first thing I want to do, again, because we want to do mobile first, I want to stick there to the bottom there. I'm going to start with that. Let me see, how is it that I don't have time to. Okay. All right. So one of the first things I can do for this is, instead of having my logo and the title of my website next to each other, maybe I want to have them one after the other. So I can start with, I think I assigned a class of logo to that container, and I did it with let me see, 50% I can do maybe. So the logo, but before that, and again this is for my small device, I want to break the float of this device because right now the logo and the title they're both floated to the left. So in order for them to, the logo be on top and the title be at the bottom, I need to break that float. And I'm going to say, because I'm using a class of header, and the class of 3, and then header the class of 9 for each of the sections there. I want to say float none, so I want to break that float, and by simply doing that you can see that now my logo is on top and the title of the website is at the bottom, and you don't see the red anymore. It's because I got rid of the red here. But I want to see here, I'm going to do header image 50%. Let me see if that actually works there. I can't remember if yeah, so there it goes. The other thing I want to do is with the title of the website, maybe that's too big for small smart fonts to see that big title. So I can say header h1 font size. Let's do the original size that I have here for h1. Actually, I don't have one. It's just the default one. I have so I'm gonna do 18 pixel font size. Actually, on smart devices, by the way, I think you can probably be okay to just go with RAMs, because most of those browsers support RAMs. You don't have to. You're not gonna see a smartphone using Internet Explorer, and what I mean is Internet Explorer 8 and below. Chances are, even if mobile Windows phones use Internet Explorer, there's probably Internet Explorer 10 or above already. So I'm reducing the size. I can center it actually. Text align center, and so now it's that way. Get started with responsive web design. For the header, let me see if I header. See if this takes effect. There we go. So then I don't need this here, because the one rule above is taking care of both the image and the title, because they're both under the header. Okay, so that's that. For the navigation, we do have a problem here. We see that things are not lining up properly. That will be a little more tricky to do. Let me see. One thing I can start with is navigation. LI. I remember applying some margin to the right of each item. So margin right 4 pixel. And let me see what that does. It's 3 items still. We can find another way. I'm not going to go too much into generating the navigation. There's many ways. In fact, on the resources that I'll be providing, there's a whole bunch of ways you can address navigations, different methods. Let me do one more thing. Navigation padding. I know I applied some padding before. Actually, padding. Too big, so keep the padding the same on top. That's a little bit better. I think we're still missing one item, and again, I'm not gonna go. It's just to show you how you can tweak things based on the what you're doing with the structure of the device. So the other problem here is the floats for the main content and the sidebar information here. So you can see we have the sidebar very tiny, and then the main content. We probably don't want them side by side. What we want is have them one after the other, just like we did with the logo and the title of the website. So I can use the same rule up here to eliminate the float of the main content and the sidebar. So I can say content, because that's the main container of those areas, and then main was the class for the main content, and then I can say content, and sidebar was the class for the sidebar region there. So if I clear this, now what I have is that my main article is now showing on top, and then it follows the the sidebar and my image there, and finally the footer. So this is perfectly fine as far as displaying this website on a mobile device. So we went from this, and I'll get rid of those obnoxious colors, by the way. But we went from structuring a website this way, where things are side by side because there's plenty of space, to small devices, reducing it so things are lined up one after the next. And this is perfectly fine to use. Navigation, again, will need a little bit more work, but I just want to show you the principles. Now let's move on to the next item. bigger devices like the small tablets or large smartphones. And for those, I can actually use many of the same rules that I used for the small devices. In fact, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to keep this rule in place. I'm going to keep this rule in place. I'm going to keep this one. I may need to alter. This one I will probably alter. The navigation, let's see how that works out. But let's start with that first. I'm going to save this. I'm using the same rules for here that I'm using here. I may need to alter a couple of those. But what you see here now on small tablets or large smartphones, I have the same structure as I do on smartphones, which is perfectly okay. The only thing I will probably change here is that for the image, for the logo, I probably want it a little bit smaller. And for the font size of my title, I probably want it a little bit bigger. Let me maybe 2.4 RAM. And this one, just to be safe, I'm going to say 2.4 24 pixel for that. So let's see what that does. There you go. So the font, the logo is smaller, the title is a little bit bigger. So I move here, you can see things change a little bit. The navigation I can leave the way it is there, and everything else is perfectly fine also. Then as I move up to the next level devices, we're talking here iPads and portrait mode, for example. This one I think is perfectly okay to leave it this way. I don't think we need to do anything for this and anything beyond this. So what I'm going to do is basically get rid of this two, I'm just going to comment them for now, two rules, media queries there. I'm going to refresh my page. If I go up, then that's again portrait, iPads in portrait mode, and then desktop, laptops, and large screens. So this is perfectly okay. And what you see here is that because I started with mobile first as far as addressing the different structure and layout of the website, by addressing this first, if I move up to a little bit bigger devices, things get a little bit easier to work with because the rules that I applied originally still apply here. And by the time I get to a little bit bigger devices, I really don't have to do much. In this particular example, that is. Every project is different, of course. But so that's how you can quickly address responsive web design on a project. So this one, I don't need to do anything with this here. There's other ways and you can combine these rules, so you don't have to repeat them all. But right now, I'm just showing you how you can address them that way here. Obviously, if I had more time, I could show you a more effective way of writing this code through using SAS or less. Body, I want to do margin top 2M because the logo is all the way up at the top. I want to give a little more room at the top there for whatever reason. Maybe it's padding. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong there. There we go. And so that's that. Let's see here. That's pretty much all I would do with this, to be honest with you. Resize this. Yeah, that's pretty good there. So that's it. That's how you would style a responsive website using a grid system like the 960, the fluid grid system, or any other grid system that comes as part of a framework. And that brings me into talking about frameworks real quick. I talked before about that. I would mention a couple ones that I use a lot. The first one is Foundation. This is a framework that offers a lot out of the box, including a grid system that is not only fluid but is responsive. If we go under the docs section here, you will see that grid system is there, and again, it's all responsive. By simply applying classes to your divs, you can create a responsive website. And the nice thing about this is that you can actually address multiple devices simultaneously as you're creating your divs. You can say, for example, on a small screen, I use 2 columns, but on a large screen, I want to use 4 columns out of the 12. So you can already start addressing responsiveness as you're putting your layout together versus the way I did it here, where I just created some single rules, and through media queries, I modify those rules myself to adjust based on the screen size. Navigation is another way that you can This grid system offers a great way to address navigation, and that's why I didn't go too much into detail about styling my navigation, because there's many ways out there that you can take advantage of the way other systems use navigations, and this one does a really nice job creating multiple ways of addressing navigation. Buttons, just like I said before, by simply giving your anchors the class of button, or tiny, small, medium, you can have this type of buttons, so you don't have to write that code yourself. Typography, um, all the styles for typography are come out of the box here, ready for you to use. And many more things, JavaScript libraries such as, for example, Orbit, which gives you a nice slideshow for your website that you can really easily implement. Very nice to do and easy to do. So Foundation is a framework that I highly recommend. I've used it a lot. It works really well. The other one that I also use and that works just as good as Foundation, and they work very similarly, they provide the same type of features and tools, is the Twitter's Bootstrap, which is what you see here. Same thing, it offers a grid system, um, and it offers all sorts of new classes, CSS classes to use for typography, for buttons, and a lot more. The principle on all of those are the same. It's just that they may use slightly different names for the classes, but they all boil down to being able to provide you with a grid system that is fluid, that is responsive, and many more tools that you can take advantage of. And the nice thing about both of these frameworks is that you don't have to necessarily download the entire thing if you don't want to. If you're only interested in a on a grid system for your design, then you can just download that by simply clearing all the boxes and just choosing the grid system, for example, here. So it's nice because you don't have to download everything else that you may not need or use on your project. So you can handpick just what you want based on the needs of your project. So again, I hope that this gives you a good intro on responsive web design. I hope that you've learned a little bit. Here's my contact information. Feel free to contact me at any time with any questions. I'll try to answer those. And if I can't help you with those, then at least I'll try to point you in the right direction. Follow me on Twitter at DesignsDrive. You'll find that I'm always posting information about web design, responsive web design, Drupal, and everything else in between. So follow me. And I hope that this was helpful. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.